drifts away, days burn, disintegrate, years roll along and fade. Don't let them slip away. Right here, right now, today. These are the good old days. Right here, right now, today. Hey, these are the good old days.
Hey, yo, look who's here. It's three men lost in time.
The Great Apes.
The Great Apes. How are you guys doing other than exhausted because we're at different time zones?
Time zones are weird, man. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, and good morning.
I should have called this live stream Escape from the Time Zones of the Planet of
My time zone is strictly in the 70s at the moment. I thought if we're looking at Planet of the Apes, late 60s, early 70s, should I go with the Planet of the Apes loincloth?
Oh, yeah.
Or should I go with the Space 1999 uniform?
All right.
And I thought in respecting the the audience, they might not want to see me in a loincloth.
I think they just
know my audience.
They're just lucky we're wearing shirts.
I think that like 25% of the chat right now has seen you in a loincloth.
I said I wouldn't tell.
I'm not getting any more detail than that. I'm just saying that's what I can glean from what we've been talking about here.
Ixnay on the oinlate off clay.
There we go. You're talking that big Latin again. When I was in grade 4, and teachers were weird back in the 80s, and so the teacher just asked one question. It's like, does anybody here speak another language? Just like off the top of his head. Anybody? And there's this weirdo kid whose name we will not mention because I clearly think he's watching this episode, and puts his hand up and he's like very arrogant, like that very arrogant kid. He's like, I can speak pig Latin. And then the teacher just tore a strip. He's like, that's not a language. You're trying to fool. And I was like, oh, if you did that today, you'd lose your job forever. You're like, what did you say to my son?
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I can speak pig Latin. Get out of here. Oh, Mrs. Space Commander is leaving some emojis in the chat. It's like she's telling you to go on a vegetarian diet, I think, is what she's trying to say.
Say no more. Say no more. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Say no more.
There we go. So guys.
I can see it now. Sorry.
This is a work phone.
Yeah, this is a work phone. Stay off it. So guys, when we get together and chat, we usually chat about toys and beloved things from our childhood. And
yes.
It's a lot of fun. And look at G-Force Racing is here.
Hey, how are you, buddy?
This guy, I tell you what, G-Force Racing, I don't know if he's made my collection better or worse. But at Joe Fest, he wanted to show he cared. So he gave me this little character here to go on my, my collection. And
caring is caring.
Little nice note saying that he's caring about me. But now everybody who comes in and sees all of this focuses on this Care Bear and like, oh, you're into Care Bears? I'm like, yeah, don't ignore the 300 GI Joes behind me and focus on the one Care Bear. So thanks.
Well, I legitimately liked Care Bears as a kid, though. I had a bunch of them.
Yeah, no, you did. That's great. And
thanks for noticing.
No, and it was one of those things that you just watch it because it was on. It was just part of the zeitgeist.
No, I legitimately liked it. I was a big fan of it. I liked the movie. I love the cartoons. I'm trying to remember the name of the bad guy from
Beastly?
the cartoon.
Beastly?
No.
Like with the Frozen guy?
Yeah, it wasn't Beastly, was it? Surely.
Well, no. So then the TV show had No Heart.
Yeah.
His assistant was Beastly, and then his niece was Shrieky.
Ah, yeah. Well, the ice guy. That was a truly scary character for me as a child. Obviously, I was a bit of a baby. Get over it. But it was, I liked the cartoon. I love the toys. I used to play with them with He-Man. Same universe.
I believe that the ice guy was named Chili Reginald. I think he was a British fellow.
I believe he was Chili Reg.
I wouldn't say get over it with your concerns with the Care Bears. After all, you were the young lad who genuinely thought your cassette of Masters of the Universe 1987 was haunted.
Yeah. It was haunted. Well, after watching that video for, I mean, I must have nearly worn it out, and then finally playing through the credits, playing action figures while the credits are rolling, see an extra scene you've never seen before. You only got to assume that it's haunted by Skeletor.
And maybe because the tape was so worn out that the resolution got much better, the picture cleared up really well. The scene
Maybe.
before.
I cleared right out in my loincloth. I was on the front yard, scared for my life, waiting for Mum to get back from the shops.
That's brilliant.
I don't know if it was brilliant, but it definitely happened.
But like I was saying, so we talk about stuff that we know and love from our childhood, and a lot of that came out of the like late 70s, early 80s, kind of just mostly like us, kind of came out in the late 70s, early 80s. And for me, and I'd say probably my favorite franchise of all time, being Planet of the Apes. It was not that. It was almost a lost and then found franchise. By the time I came around, they were done their Apes run, and it was like a huge thing. It was a huge phenomenon. It was Star Wars before Star Wars, as I like to call it. And so I just wanted to invite you guys on. I know you guys both have fondness for the Apes, and just kind of talk about your experience with the Apes and kind of go through the Apes timeline, which is a bit of a mind bend.
It sure is.
Yeah, so I was first exposed to them. I think I was 8. And my mom would go out on Wednesdays to like a craft night. They'd go and make crafts, and then she'd come home with the crafts. So she'd leave around 7:30, and then our bedtime was 8 o'clock. And I remember my dad coming in at like 10 after 8, being like, "Get up, come here." And he like snuck me into the living room to watch Planet of the Apes, which was coming on. And my dad is not a science fiction guy at all. Like for a large amount of years, if I'd recommend a movie, he'd be like, "Is there any robots in this movie, son? I'm not watching any of those robot movies you like."
No robots.
But he was like genuinely excited to show me Planet of the Apes. And I remember being blown away because it seemed so it didn't seem like an old movie. It just seemed like an otherworldly experience. And so that was so maybe that's why I'm so tied to it, because it was like this adventure that my dad took me on without my mom knowing. And then like years later, my mom was like, "I knew he did that. He was just messing with you." And I was like, "Oh." But when were you guys first exposed to the Apes, the beloved Apes?
I'll let you go first, Spacey. I talk too much.
Who, me? Oh. Well, it's interesting because you'll find this a terrible shock, but I was always a sci-fi nerd even when I was little.
No.
So I was aware of Planet of the Apes, but I didn't see it when I was a little kid. And it's kind of a funny thing that my mum, I remember like talking to my mum about Planet of the Apes, and she had seen it, back in, when it originally came out. She was like, "Oh, it's terrible, Grandma, it's terrible. It's so horrible what they do. The apes, what they do to the people. It's terrible. It's horrible." And she was like really horrified by it.
Yeah.
So I grew up thinking it was like this real spooky horror film. I thought it was going to be crazy. So I never got to see it as a kid. But then when I think I must have been either my late teens or early 20s, I saw the first one, and I was just like,
recently.
"This is great, this is brilliant." And I from that point on, I went on a real kind of adventure of watching the films, the series, as it were,
Right.
and some of the spin-off projects that we'll come to, I'm sure, in our discussion.
Yeah.
Because
We're
there's
gonna
a lot
get
to talk about. Yeah. It's funny because my mum and dad, they would sometimes put I guess they either weren't aware or whatever, but that the age certificates on video cassettes back in the 70s and 80s, sometimes they would put a film on that was completely inappropriate for children.
Right.
I wonder why the hell we were freaked out by it. And then,
True.
And then other times they're saying, no, you mustn't watch Planet of the Apes. It's the ghastly horror film. No, give me a break.
Planet of the Apes is rated G, like in Canadian rating symbols. It's rated G, as in like the lowest, most acceptable rating it can be. Like it's rated the same thing as Frozen.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's stuff about they did like some brain surgery, unnecessary surgery on a couple of the characters.
Yeah.
But you don't actually see any of that.
No.
It's just what it's spoken about. But I guess for my mum, that was traumatic enough. Just the idea of it,
Now, were your parents sci-fi fans at all?
No, no, not in the slightest. Well, my mum liked Blade Runner, but only because Harrison Ford was in it.
Right.
Oh, of course. He's so dreamy.
Well,
Yeah.
this is the thing, because it's funny, because when I was younger, my mum, she liked Harrison Ford and Bruce Springsteen and all these guys who were like hip at the time. And then all of these guys, one by one, they left their wives. And my mum never forgave them. Never.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford's on the scrap heap. Right next to Springsteen. Right next to
Get out of
the
here.
Talking Heads. Get him out of here.
So
Get out of here.
my dad is one of my favorite practical jokers of all time, and one of his gags all throughout his marriage with my mom was whenever she would say, "Oh, I like this actor," the next movie they were watching with him in it, he'd casually drop, "Oh, he just left his wife for some young girl," and she'd be like, "Oh," and it would just like ruin the movie. She'd be like so upset. Like, and to the point where, you know, on Sunday morning or on Sunday afternoons, he'd watch like fishing shows because those were on. And she's like, "Oh, watching this fishing show." And you're like, "Yeah, this guy just left his wife for some young girl." And she's like, "Oh, just
Some other cod.
yeah, it would just ruin it for her." And then finally she caught on to what he was doing, which was quite funny.
He was playing on another level.
Oh, my dad is a very subtle man, but he is the funniest practical joker I've ever heard in my entire life.
Way to ruin a movie.
Yeah.
You got to really commit to the bit then, don't you? It's like, okay, we've only just started this movie. How annoyed do I want her to be for the entire thing?
Well, my mother is a very intelligent woman, but she's just also very, very trusting, like very trusting. And I think my favorite example of my dad taking advantage of that for hilarious reasons was we put in Predator 2. And so it starts with LA, and my dad just goes, "Oh, this is a true story." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Starts watching it. And she's halfway through, she's like, "This isn't a true story." I'm like, "No, Mom, it's not 1997 right now."
Well, so I think hey, Nate, the retro tinker himself. I remember Planet of the Apes being Mum's movies, right? Mum was a big movie person, really into music too, but kind of on her own. Like she was just sort of experiencing these things on her own. At least by the time I was old enough to notice things, right?
Yeah.
So Mum would go and pop on a movie by herself, or while we were playing, she'd just go throw on a movie. And so if we were about, right, because she'd want some quiet times, like, the kids are playing G.I. Joe in the backyard, I'm going to pop a movie on. And a lot of those times it was movies like Planet of the Apes. Not that there's any other movies like Planet of the Apes, but she, I guess, I don't know whether she was a sci-fi fan or just a fan of film and TV, because like she liked all sorts of things. Like she could watch in one day, she could watch Planet of the Apes, Dances with Wolves, and Dirty Dancing, right? And the genre shifts would not matter. It'd be like just watching another great movie. And I do think Dirty Dancing is a pretty great movie. I love that movie. And if you haven't checked it out, check it out one time, won't you, Space Commander? I know you're sitting there going, "No, it couldn't be." Check it out. Patrick Swayze. Woo.
Swayze can get away with anything, man.
Yeah. Plus, there's a really cool watermelon scene. So there was. Oh, hi to the person off camera.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Just gonna go close my door right now for those reasons.
Well, it's in the church. It could be anyone. Anyway, so they were Mum's movies, right? So I think it wasn't until Spaceballs where I was like, "Hang on, this kind of seems familiar," because I'd seen bits and pieces of Planet of the Apes. So I hadn't really sat down and watched it. And we're watching Spaceballs, and I was like, "This scene seems really familiar. Have we seen this before?" She goes, "No, this is a goof. This is a gag, right? This is from Planet of the Apes." I was like, I'm gonna go back. Thanks to Mel Brooks, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna check out the Planet of the Apes. And Mum seemed legitimately happy to do so. It's like, "Oh, we'll check these ones." And she had them on VHS. I remember she later got them on DVD and being quite proud of, I can't remember which one specifically, but she seemed quite proud of being able to own a copy of one of them on DVD, because it must have been real hard to try and get it. And then, that's when I finally sat down and I don't know whether it was because we watched most of them in one sitting or whether or not they were just legitimately crazy experiences of movies. But it was like, man, it was a wild ride. And it is, if you watch them all back to back, it is a wild ride.
Yeah. So now you said your mom wasn't specifically a sci-fi fan, just a movie fan in general. But I think it's neat that all of our parents, who Spacey and I parents were not sci-fi fans. Your mom kind of liked everything, but these movies seem to have like an impact on them more than like a typical movie. So to the point where your mom was saying like, don't watch it. And my dad was like, get out of sleep. You got to come see this. Whereas like there was this phenomenon that we really missed that happened in '68 when Planet of the Apes came out. And like I said, kind of in our opening, it doesn't feel like an old movie. It just seems like a out of an otherworldly movie. Like the costumes are so they're not like anything else on like the sets. And it seems like this other world. And so go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking that was the clever thing about it is, are we going to discuss the ending of the film in this stream?
Okay. So this movie came out in 1968.
It's not really a spoiler then.
and when they release a DVD copy of it now, they put the spoiler on the cover. So we are good to spoil. If you haven't
that is true.
Stop now, go watch them, and then come back because we're going to spoil it all.
Okay, well, I have a story about the VHS cover, but we'll come to that later on. But yeah, I was going to say that because of the fact that the planet is Earth was not revealed until the very last scene. Oh, sorry, Xazyl, I'm sorry. Because that wasn't revealed till the last scene, they had to kind of fool the audience into thinking this was something totally different. So the production design on the film was fantastic. The way they were able to come up with for the Apes Society this architecture that looked so alien and yet natural to the environment, and the scenes where they were traveling through the wilderness, because it was all shot in these far-flung kind of wilderness locations, it really gave it an alien quality. So sorry to interrupt, but I just thought that was that's something to mention, that the fact that the production design on it was incredible, the way that they made it. So that's what makes it timeless. You can watch it now, and the film could have been made, recently. Of course, now
I think it holds up. I think it holds up better than the Marky Mark one.
That one didn't exist. That one there was never a Marky Mark Planet of the Apes. What are you talking about?
My mum liked that one too, which makes me think that she wasn't just a sci-fi fan. She must have just been a fan of film entirely. Like this is
kind of leading men.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, she found out
like
that
she was
single. But it's crazy, that one. It is crazy, but no, not part of the same universe, obviously.
No. And I think, so for me, I watched the first one and with my dad that night. And again, didn't see the ending coming, wasn't aware of it. It wasn't in pop culture at that time for me. I was like, this. So I got hook, line, and sinker, the whole thing I was in. But then I saw like snippets of the other stuff, but we didn't have like IMDb to go to. There wasn't like our video store didn't have any of the other ones on rental because they only had so much space and you had to pick and choose what they had there. So it was like then like I don't know, probably a 10-year journey of like piecing together bits and pieces that you'd see. And so, you'd watch Planet of the Apes, the movie, and you're like, this is great. And so that night my dad actually taped it as well. So I would put it back in and just watch the taped off of television version of that movie. But then you'd see like, oh, there's another Planet of the Apes movie coming on this weekend, and it's like the lost city of the Planet of the Apes. And I'm like, okay, there's another one. And you're like, well, now humans can talk, and I don't like, where does this fit into the, and so it wasn't until I was in high school and we had access to the internet where I was like, okay, so what order do I watch these in? Where do they fall? And then you put it all together, and it's a wild ride. But there was so much out there. And even like I had a Mego Dr. Zaius figure from a yard sale, and it was just naked. But I was like, I know that this is from the Planet of the Apes franchise. I know that. I don't know who the character is. I don't know who he's supposed to be. I don't know what his clothes are supposed to look like. Like I don't know anything. So actually, I think I put him. They had some clothes there. I put him in an Action Jackson jumpsuit was
Perfect. Yeah, that works.
and so it was really just kind of like building this world and then seeing it together. But it was I think maybe that's one of the reasons it's it is my favorite franchise, is that it took work to find everything out. Like it wasn't spoon fed to you.
Yeah, I think some of Mum's must have been on recorded off TV too. Some of her VHS copies probably were, but we used to, and I'm sure this wasn't just an Australian thing. So you might your experiences might be similar, but we used to have like event television weekends or weekdays or something, right, where they would do like Star Wars was always my favorite. They'd always play Star Wars, from like a 3-day event, or sometimes even in the same night. And Planet of the Apes was one of those ones as well, where they did like event TV. But interestingly, I can remember seeing Planet of the Apes on TV during the day when it's just like wives at home back then. Don't jump on me. That's how it was. Get over it. So when wives were at home, they were playing that for TV. But then, at night, it would sometimes still be the event Planet of the Apes. And I think, there you go. I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the video cover with the spoiler on the end, I think that back in those days, if I recall correctly, is that there were a lot of movies that took the most iconic part of that movie and put it on the cover with the assumption of everyone's already seen it, right, or this is the best scene, so we're just going to throw it on there. And little care for what it was giving away. One of the ones that scared me the most was American Werewolf in London. The cover to that we had here in Australia was just like the open mouth half transformation thing. I was like, oh, this is scary.
So the American Werewolf in London, here's a tie-in.
Yep.
The actor who played the American Werewolf, his brother played one of the humans from the Apes TV show. There he is.
I knew I brought that up for a reason.
They even look alike.
Yeah, they look identical. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to walk us through the timeline of the, I'm going to call it the original Apes rung. So this is everything before Tim Burton got his paws on it. And
it looked exactly like me.
Stinking paws of
Tim Burton. But I will say this. My kids grew up, especially my son, watching the newest version, like the Caesar trilogy. And for a long time, so my son was born in 2009, so he would have been, a young guy when that first one came out. But for the longest time, we didn't think he could read. We were like, oh, like he's not reading. He's like kind of refusing to do it. And is there like a disability going on there? Do we got to look into that? Do we got to get him some training? And then one day when he was maybe 4 or 5, and his little sister was, 2, we heard this like very articulate talking coming from the living room. And we go in and, my 5-year-old's watching Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and he's reading all the subtitles of the apes doing sign language perfectly.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
And I was like, buddy, can you read that? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, why don't you read the books that we give you? And he's like, this is worth reading. They got 5. This is worth reading. So then that became like our movie. So when he, they come out in theater, we would go, and even though he was young, he loved those movies. And so a bunch of us went and just saw the new one, The Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which is good. It's like those movies are really good. And he said like, hey, can we watch the old ones? So just last week, each night we watched all 5 of the old ones. And even to the last one, he was like, these are better. Like these are better movies, Dad. Like these are great. And so maybe I'm raising my son a little differently, but holds up to a 16-year-old. These movies, they're again timeless. I think you can, like you said, you can watch them at any point in time, and the aesthetic along with the time travel storyline, like they just seem to be out of time.
Yeah, but even this image right here that you've just got on for display purposes, how good do they look? They look amazing.
This is the thing. I will always take practical effects, in camera effects, effects makeup over CGI any day, because they are filmed under the same conditions as everything around them. The sets, the weather, the wind blowing through their hair, they're under the same lighting conditions, the same everything as the other actors, the other performers. Everything around them is the same, and they look like they belong in the scene because they were filmed in the scene. And CGI still doesn't have that right. They still can't get it right. I don't know why everyone's banking all their money on CGI. Maybe one day they'll get it right, but I will still take these guys over CGI any day. All right, I'll try and calm down now. I've had too much sugar.
And the other thing,
I agree with it. I agree.
And the other thing to that point is, I don't know one person that goes to a movie. So let's take the new Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, that's going there and says, the CGI was so good, I actually believe they were real apes.
No one's saying
like, you know those aren't real apes. And so you know these guys are guys in suits, but give me a good story and I'll believe whatever costume they put them in.
Yeah.
Right.
When they say that though, I'm like, oh no.
Oh, that's so good. So the first one that came out was 1968's Planet of the Apes. It was based on the novel Monkey Planet. Have you guys read? Pardon me?
Is that the Thunderdome?
No, that's the prison that they're in. Playgrounds in Canada now. I don't know if this is the same thing in the UK and down under, but have made these like climbing arenas for kids. That look exactly like the prison from Planet of the Apes. Like exactly. Yeah. And every time I drive by, I'm like, I wonder if there's some kid writing in the dirt over there. My name is Taylor. Geoforce Racing is looking to make an enemy here. He says, but how do you feel about AI, Space Commander?
Well,
Space Commander didn't even spell AI.
Never mind all that. I know a couple of people, in fact, who've been making AI images of Space Commander. So you know, you just got to like it and lump it, you know.
Yeah. But so this movie came out, and Charlton Heston was kind of he agreed to do this role, and this opened him up to be the sci-fi guy, right? Then this opened the doors for like the Omega Man and Soylent Green, and like he just, I think it opened up a new career for him. And I think this movie, more than any, legitimized sci-fi as like a bankable, watchable, like real genre,
right?
Just campy and spaceships on strings, right?
Well, Mum would casually watch Ben-Hur, like just ruin the whole day by putting on. Like it's not a bad movie necessarily. It's got some great action scenes, but then it's just a very long movie.
A lot of politics talking.
A lot of it. It's like the Phantom Menace, but somehow better. And and so that's pretty much where I recognize, because Mum would watch that a lot, right? That'll take up your whole day. So I recognize that actor. Could you imagine if it's not even the same guy? And I'm just like, yeah, that's Ben-Hur. They all look the same back then. But even now, look at those ape suits.
So good. They're perfect.
Different hairstyles on them, different facial. I mean, obviously behind the mask are different facial structures, but you could very easily just go same mask, slap it on, and I'm sure some of the background guys probably do, but the main guys especially, they really have a silhouette around them that you can identify specific major characters, and I think that's really well done.
And I think it's interesting too. If you watch, there's a great documentary called "Behind the Planet of the Apes." Yes, that goes into a bunch of stuff. And so Roddy McDowell especially talked, and he'd see guys moving their faces differently with a mask on, and he would like, "How'd you do that?" And he'd say, "Well, how are you doing that?" And he would cut and modify his. So he'd wear it home at night because it takes too long to put on in the morning. So he'd wear it home at night and come back in. They fix it in the morning. But he'd like cut holes and stuff in it so that he could move it around better, and it was like a learning process how to get these appliances that look great to like maneuver better. And so it was like these guys, if you said we're going to put you in a rubber ape mask and make a movie, there are some actors who would go there and get their paycheck. These guys all showed up to work. Yeah, right? They all committed, and you can tell that. Like Dr. Zaius is one of my favorite villains of all time because you just hate him, and he doesn't throw a punch. You just hate him from day one. You're like, who is this? Oh, and he just makes you so angry. And you wouldn't think that a guy in a monkey mask could do that, but he sure does.
Yeah, and because of the Simpsons, that bloody Dr. Zayas song stuck in my head. But I think I wonder, because I know in Star Wars, right, they weren't walking around going, "We're making a masterpiece here." In Star Wars, they were like, "This is ridiculous. No one's going to like this," and it turned out to be a hit.
Right.
I don't know what they must have been thinking in these monkey suits, whether they thought they were making an absolute blockbuster of a film, or, I mean, was it though? Was it, how successful was Planet of the Apes? Was it?
It was very successful.
I wasn't around. I didn't see it.
It was so successful that during opening weekend, Fox greenlit a sequel. They're like, we need more. We need to have more. Start shooting.
Brilliant.
And then they started talks with Charlton Heston, who had never done sequels and hasn't done sequels since. He's not a sequel guy. And that's just something that some guys do. I don't understand that. But he didn't want to be attached to it. But contractually, he was. So he said, I'll only be in the second one if I'm in it for a very short amount of time, and if you kill me. And so
Harrison
then
Ford all over again.
all over again. So then we get Beneath the Planet of the Apes, where I think some people like it's. I think this is the craziest of them all, of the first five, like the most insane. I like it a lot. Like lots of people think this is the low point in these ones. I love this movie.
This is where they show the subway system or something, right? An old subway station.
Yeah, they find an old subway station because you know it's Earth now. So then the new astronaut Brent, who they were like, we need to find a guy who looks just like Heston, like just give me his body double. But again, I think he played a different enough character that you're into them both. But then he had to then find out it was Earth again in a new way. So they did that with the New York subway system.
Right.
Could you skip back to the previous slide just for a moment?
Anything for you, buddy.
Thanks, mate. This image here, the famous image of Statue of Liberty. This is I'll try and do my quick version. This is my VHS story. So a guy I used to work with. This is before DVDs had really took off and caught on. And
DVDs.
DVBs, yeah.
DVDs.
We got talking about Planet of the Apes, and he'd never seen it. And I was like, "Oh, I'll lend it to you." So I got the videotape, and as you said, the front of the sleeve is this scene at the end of the film.
Right.
I thought I can't give it to him in the box because he's going to know straight away it's Planet Earth. It's going to blow the ending for him.
Yeah.
So I thought, I've got some spare video cases. You remember the old plastic box, and it was made of transparent plastic, right?
Yeah.
So I took the cassette out, put it in one of these spare transparent boxes, and as I closed the lid and could see through at the tape, I realized that the sticker in the middle of the tape, which said like copyright 1968, 20th Century Fox, Apjack Productions, Planet of the Apes, also had that sticker on the tape.
Unbelievable.
So I had to tell him to try and put the cassette in the machine without looking at it, you know. Feel the tape in your hand and make sure you got it the right way around and just jam it in the machine.
Right.
Yeah.
And make sure it's rewound.
I can only imagine your face as you're closing it, like,
Yeah, but that's the iconic imagery. So we joked about spoilers, but they spoiled the movie way more than we ever did.
Yeah.
Right? But the reason I love part 2 almost as much as part 1 is this is the only other movie that takes place on the original Planet of the Apes as it was discovered, right? This is after this, they go back in time to Earth and then they kind of establish it. But I would have loved more movies like this, like more. Just give me this adventure. Whereas like I want to know more about the Forbidden Zone. I want to know what the other coasts of the world they live in. Like give me all that. And so you get a new villain in this. You get General Ursus, who was like the first gorilla that really had a character arc, and he's like this, military-minded brute of a guy. And Dr. Zayas is back. This is the only movie that doesn't have Roddy McDowall in it. It's a different actor playing Cornelius. But Cornelius in this movie has a small part. Like they're there, but they're not. It's not really their story. It's more of Zayas and Ursus coming through. But something else I wanted to mention about like the otherworldliness of it, because of the prosthetics they had on their faces, all the apes kind of talked with like a speech impediment, like they were talking through it, but it was so consistent that I was just like, oh, that's kind of how apes talk. Like I guess that's the way that they vocalize, and it kind of worked.
Yeah.
It was like a happy accident, right? But during the filming of this, Apes Mania started happening. Like the movie went through the roof, and a lot of these movies got many different theatrical releases. And so Heston, in all his glory, says, not only are we going to kill this, I should just blow the whole planet up. So during filming, he's like, I should set off the bomb at the end and blow the planet up. That way they can make no more sequels.
Spoiler alert. Was that on the VHS?
Yeah, that was in the front of the VHS. They're going to blow the planet up. But
the actor who played Cornelius, what was his name again?
Roddy McDowall.
What was he also known for? Many other things.
Many other things. He was the butler in Overboard with
yeah, right. He was. Yes. I remember seeing him and going, that looks like the guy from Planet of the Apes, but without an ape suit on.
He was Bookworm in Batman back in the 60s, and
oh yes,
Fright Night, the original Fright Night movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good guy.
Yeah, and they, like I said, they got real actors like Maurice Evans and Kim Hunter. Like everybody was legit. Nova was like dating the producer. That's how she got involved. Have you? I guess you would have seen it, Space Commander, because you've seen Behind the Planet of the Apes. But the original Apes makeup test, like the concept. And so the girl who played Nova played Zira.
Yeah.
In like the original, and they looked more like modern day Earth, and they were more like explorers, and it was just like a proof of concept that they could do it. And then the actor they had playing Dr. Zaius was like, I'm not putting this makeup on every day. You got to find yourself a new Dr. Zaius. And so they went with Maurice Evans. But no, it's just I loved more of this world. This ending for me was more shocking when I saw it, because I didn't see part 2 until I was for my 17th birthday. I got the entire set of all 5 VHSs on VHS for my birthday, and so that's when I saw. I'd seen the first one and I'd seen the last one. I hadn't seen 2, 3, or 4. So this ending, I remember I watched the first one, and then I'm like, I got my popcorn. I want to do it all like in a day, like binge it. And then there's like a voiceover at the end. It's like, in a small green world in a small solar system, flashed and was no more. And I was like, dead. I was like, well, what happens now? Like, what do you do? Right. And people also like to harp on this one because they say the background apes had just rubber masks on. It wasn't the same appliances for the background apes.
Yeah, right.
But in my mind, they had done the groundwork in the first one, establishing the makeup. So your mind just does it for you.
Yeah.
Like the main actors have the good stuff on, and the background actors, you just and you just in your mind draw that conclusion.
This film's kind of an interesting experience for me, because now I really like it. And I watch this film and I quite enjoy it. But the first time I saw it, I was a little space cadet. I'd just gone out into the world of being a grown up, or trying to be a grown up. And when you first move out and you think you're an adult and you think you're kind of streetwise and you know what's up. And like a lot of people at that early age, you trust the wrong person, and you can end up in a bad way. And I was in a situation where someone I trusted had ripped me off, and I'd lost all my savings, and I was being evicted from this place I was living in, and my TV was gone. So I just had this little black and white portable TV. You remember those? And it would only work. It would only pick up a channel if it was in one particular corner of the flat. And so I was in a pretty depressed kind of mood. I got over it, as you can see. Everything's fine now. But I turned the TV on, and this came on, and I thought, oh, I've been Planet of the Apes. I enjoy Planet of the Apes. I'll watch this one. And the ending of this film is so. You see, being a child-friendly action figure, I can't swear, but it was really messed up, shall we say?
Yeah.
And it played on my mind for like 2 or 3 weeks after I saw it. I was like, man, that film done me in. But now I watch it, and I can enjoy it. I know where it's going, and yeah, like you say, although the masks on the background actors weren't as intricate, they had spent a lot of time and effort making the mutant characters. That the design to them was based on drawings of the human anatomy without their skin on.
Yeah.
They had dozens and dozens of actors made up to look like they had no skin on. I think that's where the money went.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the switch to blow the bomb up, the switch controls were then retooled and reused for Superman's Fortress of Solitude.
Right. Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, like this movie again took us back on this adventure, and when that first movie ends, you're like, what happened? Like, just tell me more, right? When George Lucas talked about making Empire Strikes Back, he said people were so hungry for more installment. The movie could have been someone standing in front of a chalkboard saying, Luke did this, and then Darth Vader did this, and the people would pay for it, right? And I feel the same way about this.
Disney and Space Commander?
Sorry?
Said a chalkboard would be better than what Disney's doing.
Okay.
When Adam first contacted me and said, we're going to talk about Planet of the Apes, my first question was, are you talking proper Planet of the Apes or that new Disney one?
Uh-oh.
And as much as I love Planet of the Apes, because we're talking about the first 5 films here, we might go into there being 10 films in the original series, but we'll come to that. The more recent films with James Franco and so on, I enjoyed those films. I watched the first 3 of them. They've done a 4th one, and I have not watched it, and I will not give a single penny of my hard-earned money to Disney under any circumstances. Now, that may seem like, well, who cares? You're just one guy. But if I feel that way, there are people all around the world who feel that way. And
I feel like Spacey's about to go into the Rocky IV speech, and if I can change, and you can change, everybody can change.
And then even the Russians are cheering for me.
Exactly. Bringing worlds together. So Charlton Heston did not want to do another one. And you know what? It's one of those things where it's like, he dumped his wife and it ruins it for you. I'm like, why can't Charlton Heston love the apes as much as I love the apes? Right? Just love it, man. Just love it and do it.
That image at the end of his bloody hand. And he's going, it's doomsday. For goodness sake. If you imagine my mental state at the time and then seeing this, you can understand why I was so screwed up.
But even though at that moment when you felt at your lowest, Spacey, there was another day. Yes. Right? There was another day. So against Charlton Heston's best attempt, right away they're like, we need a third. Planet of the Apes 2 did so well, we need a third one. And so where do we go? We blew up the planet, right? Can you imagine being in that room? And it's like, well, hey, what do you want to do next? Blew the planet up. And so the story goes is that Cornelius and Zira and Aldo, their other ape monkey who are ape scientists there, went back in time to 1968 or 69, whenever it was, to modern Milo. That's what it was. We loved Milo. We loved Milo. That's right. I apologize. That's why I got Spacey here. Keep me in line. And so they go back to modern day Earth, which was a brilliant move because now you only got 2-3 apes to deal with, and everything else is just. So they cut the budget of the movie right in half because they could just film like downtown.
Take the camera inside the film.
Yeah, and so this is a continuation of the story, but a much, much different film.
It is probably the more heartbreaking film out of the 3. Yeah. So if Space Commander was sad after the second one, it would have been even more so in this one. But because Mum was watching these so often, and before I'd actually sat down to watch them, I remember vividly seeing parts of this movie, just parts of it, and I thought that was all one movie. right? And I thought to myself, this must be the most grand movie ever, because it starts off with the guy finding out that it's Earth. He blows it up, and these guys go back in time. I had no idea that it was like a three-parter by this stage. I thought it was just one mega movie, and so I'm glad that it's not, because you can imagine how much they would have to chop and change in order to get 3 stories into one movie. But I just remember vividly seeing these. I think I must have watched more of this one just on the others. So maybe it was Mum's favorite one. I'm not sure, but I definitely saw more of this one before I saw all of them.
Yeah, and this is the movie where you really fell in love with Zira and Cornelius. It was before that they were like, main characters. They were very much attached to the plot, but you didn't really get to know their characters all that well. It was just they were more there for device reasons, and they say they loved Taylor, and in part 2 they're like, Taylor, we loved him, and they show themselves to be the most compassionate of the apes and the most free thinking. But this is the movie that makes you kind of fall in love with them. And you also see like a crazy side of humankind. Right up until this point, apes were villains, and we were rooting for this like human to like survive this crazy planet. And then my son watching this one a week ago, he's like, when they reversed the roles, Dad, I feel bad about being a human. And I was like, maybe that they were there, what they were going for. And I think these movies, not to put more on them than we should, but at a first glance, they're movies about people in monkey suits, but they're all like real deep social commentary going on here in every one of these movies. And so the hysteria, like if you think about it, if talking monkeys came to, or apes, I should say, because monkeys have tails and they're offended by that.
True.
If some talking apes came now and said, in 3,000 years, someone's going to blow the Earth up, I'm like, do I care about 3,000 years from now? Like, is it mass hysteria? And it seemed to be mass hysteria happening with these humans. And so it was a real journey to have like, which humans can you trust? Which apes can you trust? It was a whole thing. But this one to me was like one of the most surreal ones where I was like, this is going places.
Can you remind me why he blew the Earth up again? Like, it wasn't just because it was overtaken by apes, though, surely.
It was so the bomb was leaking, and they were like, he was shot and Brent was shot, and was Nova shot or was Nova watching?
Her old Nova got blasted as well.
Yeah,
that broke my heart.
absolutely. Like, again, every one of these movies has such a jarring ending. Like they all end with like they're great movies. And you're like, ooh, that feels weird. So they're all dead, and I think it was just Heston or Taylor, I guess is the character's name, being like, I got one move left. I'm taking you all with me. There's no good care from this.
I think he was horrified by what the humans had become, the mutants, and the only other side was the apes. And after the way they treated him and his fellow astronauts, he hated them as well. So I think he was just like, yeah, that's his trump card. I beat you all. Bye. One of the mutants was played by Natalie Trundy, and she was actually the blonde scientist in the third movie.
Right.
But of course, she looked very different with skin on in the third movie.
you notice that in these 8 movies, if you deep dive into the cast, there's lots of carryover as different characters going on in a bunch of these. With the most prevalent being Roddy McDowell, who's just like, I'll be in them all. Well, how many characters do you want me to be? I'll do it all. But if anybody here grew up and was ever homesick in the 80s or early 90s and saw the soap opera Young and the Restless, there was a very famous character named Victor Newman. And so there is a very, very young Victor Newman in this movie. And he also played the main villain in the pilot episode of Wonder Woman. So he was a good 70s villain going on here. And he was the one who really, I wouldn't say took advantage of Cornelius and Zira, got Zira drunk, made her tell her about Taylor, and really kind of went political with it. And it's this movie gets very intense. It has about 25 minutes of like, it almost becomes comedic when they're like going around town, they're taken into a boxing match, and she discovers what wine is, and they're going to parties, and they're like beloved. Yeah, it's grape juice plus.
Grape juice plus.
Right?
Yeah.
Sneaky over.
Actually, talking of Wonder Woman, the girl who played Nova, when the
Yes.
producers in the 60s, here we go. So the producers of the 1960s Batman show with Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin, they shot a very short pilot, like a proof of concept film. It was only like 10 minutes long, something like that. And it was very bizarre, but it was like a take on the Wonder Woman character. And you have this, you know, by 60s standards, a not entirely glamorous woman playing Wonder Woman. But when she looks at her reflection in the mirror, it's Nova from Planet of the Apes.
Yes, plays the reflection of Wonder Woman.
Very strange, very strange.
Yeah. And then there's this very hilarious, like she flies out the window at the end, and it's like slide whistle, like whoop. So
all right, we'll look that up later.
Yeah, no, look, it's surreal. It's very, very surreal. But yeah, so there's this movie, and at the end, Zira and Cornelius have a baby, and they run away with the baby, and then all three are gunned down, like they shoot a baby chimpanzee, like swaddled in a blanket.
It's rough.
It's messed up.
Yeah,
it's Dr. Hustline, isn't it?
It's exactly what that is. That's what's going on. But
and I think it's fair to say that you hate the humans more than you ever hated the apes in any of the apes movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the apes, they do terrible things, but also like, what would we do if all of a sudden there was like a talking chimpanzee? Like, would we? You know what I mean? It's like it's a mind mend that goes on here. That
so what you just said there reminded me of something. I thought about this once. I was watching the fourth one, which we'll come to in a little bit, and they asked one of the humans, you know, why do you hate the apes? Why are you so cruel to them? Why do you hate them so much? And he says something like, it's because they remind us of where we come from, and we can't stand it. We can't stand to look at ourselves. And I'm thinking to myself, that's why the Americans hate the English. They can't stand looking at themselves.
That's why the English hate us.
Oh no, we love the Aussies. We love the Aussies. The amount of Australian TV shows and pop stars and all the rivalry in the cricket. I know that our side gets sledging your side and vice versa, but it's all in good fun. And they in cricketing terms, the English consider the Aussies to be their best enemies. So we're fine with the Aussies. Don't worry.
All right, I feel better about that.
Yeah. Now the one thing though that does take me out of this movie, is that when the apes first arrive in 1969, they are taken to like a zoo medical facility.
Yeah.
And next to them is a gorilla.
Yeah.
And it's clearly just a guy in a Halloween costume. Like it's just
it's not very good. But maybe that is from the perspective of the apes, where they see a gorilla that we would see as a regular looking gorilla as something that looks very not quite real, a little bit otherworldly. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. I just saved it, Adam.
You saved it, and it didn't ruin the movie. I'm just like, that's maybe one thing that doesn't age well here. But
I wouldn't want to be in the same room as a gorilla, though, either. No, and I'm not against gorillas if any gorillas are watching, but fair's fair.
You know what? I am. If there's gorillas watching this, screw you guys.
I knew a guy, and I swear this is not me. So I know some people tell the story that I knew a guy, but it turns out it was them. This was not me. But I knew a guy that thought apes was an ape was a different type of animal. So you had gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, and apes. I'm like, no, they're all apes. That's why they're called the great apes. Are there any lesser great apes?
No, I don't think so. I think they're all great.
Humans. It was me, Gap. You were right. I thought ape was its own thing.
One of my favorite stories from the making of the first movie is that when they would break for meals, without talking about it, all the chimps would sit together and all the gorillas would sit together and all like the orangutans would just sit together naturally because they're like, I guess you look like me.
Yeah, the same thing happened on Babylon 5. I saw an interview with Joe Straczynski, who was the producer of Babylon 5, and he said the same thing happened. They would all the guys in Centauri makeup would all sit together for lunch. All the guys in the Narn makeup would go sit together for lunch, and all the Earth Force, the humans would go sit. And he actually didn't, because he has a background in psychology. He did an experiment one day. He said to the makeup guy, "That guy over there, tomorrow when he comes in, put him in the other makeup. Don't have him as this character anymore. Have him as someone else." And for the first couple of days, he still sat with the original group, but he looked uncomfortable. And by the end of the week, he was sat with the other guys.
That's so cool.
Humans are the worst.
Oh, I love that.
Talking of, how do you come up with a third film after the ending of the second one? And you're saying, were they all sitting in a room and said, "How do we do this?" The attention to detail, in the previous films, they had mentioned this theory of traveling back in time along a Husline curve. And then we come into this film and you meet Dr. Husline and he's the villain.
Yeah.
To take that tiny little piece of information and use it. I think they came up with the idea of that probably based on what we space guys used to call an Einstein-Rosen bridge. Nowadays people tend to call them wormhole in space. But we used to call them an Einstein-Rosen bridge. And I think that they had the idea, you could take a scientist-sounding name, Husline, and apply it to this curvature in time. And I think that's where they came up with that idea. But to take that tiny detail and blow it up into a major character for the third film, I think that was very clever.
Yeah. No. And so then we get introduced to Khan in this movie.
Yeah.
Who's disguised as a circus owner, Ricardo Montalban. Does that guy ever light up the screen when he comes on?
What a smile.
Right? And he's probably the most memorable guy from this movie and the next one. Yeah. But his screen time in them both is like 12 minutes. Like he's not there very long, but he talks about Sir Francis of Assisi, and he just lights up the screen. Yeah. But he runs a circus, and he's born the first chimpanzee baby born in captivity. And so he has this chimp there, and what happens is actually Zira switches the babies at birth. And so
of course.
Right. So that leads us to, after these guys are shot and the regular chimp is shot, we then fast forward a few years to Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, where the son of Zira and Cornelius is of age, and he kind of leads his ape uprising after his master and friend is killed by humans. And I think this is the most 70s sci-fi of all the movies, with like the jumpsuits and the control station and all ape control and all that jazz. It's kind of the most 70s sci-fi set in 1994.
The future of 1994.
Yeah, I love that. So, but this movie again is great. I love everything about it. I love that Roddy McDowall is now playing his own son, and like the rise of Caesar, and it's interesting. Until I saw this movie when I was 17, I thought my dad was a little bit crazy. So my dad, not being a sci-fi guy, watching that first Planet of the Apes movie when I was like 8 or 9, and I was like, I wonder how the apes take over. And my dad, who's not a big sci-fi, doesn't deep dive stuff. He says, well, son, there was a virus, you see, and it came to Earth and it killed all the dogs and cats. And then people took apes as their pets, and then saw they could do things, then became servants, and then they eventually took over. I thought he just made that up. All right, I guess that's what it is. But when I was 17, I realized that no, my dad watched all of these movies intently and take note of, it was a phenomenon when these movies came out. Like it was a big deal. And it was like every 2 years another one hit, and before they were done the theatrical run, they had greenlit a sequel, and it was all systems go. And so you're seeing this thing kind of come full circle here. Now, this one is also, they call it the most violent and disturbing of them. It's nothing compared to nowadays, but it was jarring seeing these apes rise up, and even the character arc of Caesar going from kind of like a mild-mannered, upset kind of chimp to the guy who's going to like be almost like a dictator, like going to lead this revolt.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with it was the fact that they killed his human friend. The humans killed his human friend, the guy who raised him as his, it was his father figure, and that's what puts him over the edge.
Yeah,
goddamn lousy humans.
Why can't we have nice things, right? But again, there was some great character actors like the president and his assistant, and like all that real tense interaction between them. I loved all that stuff. I love the quirky 70s like mind control devices and truth machines and all that kind of stuff, electroshock stuff. Like I thought all that as even at 17 watching is like this is cool stuff. I love this kind of thing that's going on here. G-Force, you have a great day, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. But yeah, so it was good stuff. And then the ending of it, there's actually the ending that was written and then the ending that they released. So at the end, when the apes rise up and kind of like Caesar gives his big rousing speech where he's like, we will have our own society and our own religion and our own art and we will rule the humans. And then the speech kind of has a lull and then the camera shot like zooms in his eyes and you can't see his mouth. And he goes, but we will love the humans as our equals and we will live together in peace. And
Duke was in a coma. Duke was in a coma all along.
Yeah, Duke was in a coma all along. So that first ending was so jarring and made him look so violent that they're like, we got to change that. I think they should have left it. I think it should have been like, I think they could have made Caesar then become the villain in the next movie, right? Get back to the apes being the villains. But these apes become so beloved that they're like, yeah, we can't do that. But I think it's a much stronger ending and holds to the abrupt ending of all these movies, right? It's Earth it's exploded. These humans shot a baby like chimpanzee, and now like the hero you thought has now become the villain of these people. And so it's I think they made the wrong choice there, but still a good movie.
Yeah, it's very dark. That scene where they're torturing poor he starts out as Milo,
right?
Character is Milo. He named after the scientist who figured out how to make the spaceship work and go through time. And he chooses as the name Caesar. And when they're torturing him, Roddy McDowall is really giving it some, and he's really showing the pain that this character is in. Yeah. And then just when you think it can't get any worse, like he's God, he's on the verge of death, for crying out loud. The bad guys then crank it up even more and just zap him again. It can't get any worse. Yes, it can. Here we go.
Yeah. So these movies do not. Oh, Joe's here. More ape goodness here.
How are you, Joe? Yo, Joe.
Yo, Joe. But these movies do not hold away from just having awful villains, and like awful villains on like a cerebral level, where you're like, I hate these guys, whether they're humans or apes. You're just like, why can't you be good? Why can't you just be good?
Right.
Behave.
Yeah, and it's like, why can't we just all get along? Like a conversation would fix this.
I don't remember the movie that was called Peaceful Planet of the Apes.
It's coming up. There's some neat things coming up here. So anyways, Caesar leads this ape revolt, and the apes take over, and this is where he says it's now a planet of the apes. And then
he said the thing,
and then we move on to the battle of the Planet of the Apes. And this movie is odd. It was the second one I saw. So I saw the Planet of the Apes, and then I saw this one, and I'm like, what happened between these two movies? Because you get Caesar now trying to build a society of apes and humans living together, but the apes are ultimately in charge, right? Like the humans are there, and they're like, you guys can be around, but we have final say, and like human law didn't work and ape law will work. And you start to get some infighting between the apes, and ultimately Cornelius, who is Caesar's son, he dies from an ape cutting a tree branch. And, so there's some things that go on. And then there's also like the birth of the mutants you see as well, who are living in the irradiated forbidden zone. And it's the president from the last movie is is one of the mutants now. They're living in this like mutated world, so there's a lot going on there that sets it up. I think storyline, this may be one of the weaker storylines, but there was really cool things in this that I loved. I loved that they had an armory where even like the leader had to go there and explain why he wanted a gun.
Right. I don't remember this one at all. I knew that it existed, but I have no recollection of ever watching it.
Yeah.
So I'll go back and check this one out. But it's a cool concept. So how far after the last one does this one take place?
I want to say this one takes place probably 15 years after the last one, because Cornelius is about he's like a little kind of a preteen chimpanzee.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so the character here, the guy in the middle, the human there, is the brother of the assistant to the president in the last movie. So
okay.
He talks about like, yeah, when my brother, helped get you free and whatnot. So there's some tie-ins there.
I like that they are still tying it in though, right, and bringing back certain characters. There's a lot of that stuff is lost in sequels these days, where they tie it all together. So that's good to hear. I'll check it out.
I think if I remember, I might be wrong about this, but if I remember, I think they originally wanted the previous actor to come back and reprise the role, but I think he was unavailable. I think he'd signed on to something else. So they brought in this gentleman here, and he's fantastic because he is from the original Assault on Precinct 13.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
The only Assault on Precinct 13. What an incredible film.
That is a great movie.
But that's just another example of there's so many good things in this fifth film. It's just a shame that they couldn't execute it as well as they wanted to because the budget was slashed. The film series was doing well and continuing, as Adam was saying, every couple of years. But for this film, they reduced the budget quite substantially. And it's a shame because it was supposed to be that the ending of the film was supposed to be a war, like a final war, where the humans and the apes are forced to work together to fight the mutants. And the idea is that if they can stop the mutants, the humans and apes will form a stronger society, and this will, in effect, prevent the future that we saw in the earlier films where the Earth was destroyed. Caesar goes into the ruins of the city to find recordings of his parents because he wants to find out what they knew about the future. And he's going to find out. The idea was he's going to find out that the Earth is destroyed, and he now realizes, I exist in a time before that happens. It's my responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. And before we move on to the next film, I'll just give you a little excerpt from the book, but we'll cover that in a little bit. But there's some bizarre stuff. But yeah, there's so many good things in this film. So it's just a shame because it was, like I say, it was supposed to be this war, and the poor director had to make do with what he had. So I think he ended up with like a school bus full of mutants or something. The school bus trundling across the grass towards a handful of apes. And he said he had to put the camera in as close as possible in the crowd scenes so that it would look like there were dozens and dozens of people there, when in actual fact it was just like a scattering of people. And he couldn't show how sparsely populated these two armies were. Yeah. So he put the camera in there as close as he could.
If you watch the Canadian classic movie Strange Brew with Bob and Doug McKenzie, they make a science fiction movie at the beginning with their van. And it's based on this because they're like, we've got to go fight those fleshy-headed mutants, eh? And it's brilliant. It's really brilliant. But yeah, it's kind of shot on a similar budget, I think. But yeah, so this was the one that maybe is the weak spot of the five. Still a great movie. Lots of cool stuff. One of my favorite things about this was the orangutan you see there. We're used to orangutans being like authority figures that kind of had all the power and all the control, almost like a 1984 level of like, I know the truth, but it's going to be for me to know. And this orangutan is really much like a subservient to Caesar and kind of like he's trying to be this politician and whatnot, but there's a power shift there. It's very, very interesting to watch if you watch all these in a row to see an orangutan in that role.
And he's the little guy from the Smokey and the Bandit films.
And he's the little guy from the Smokey and the Bandit films. Exactly. Exactly.
But
So what were you gonna read for us, Spacey, before we move on?
Right. Well, I'll just mention in the cast quickly. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her name. I think it's Frances Gwen. Very beautiful actress, and she's cast in this film as one of the mutants. So she's like almost completely covered up. It's like casting against type. They had this beautiful woman completely covered up, and she's playing like this this villainous character. She's in with the mutants. But so at the end of this film, although the director couldn't give it the grand vision that he had in mind, the film still ends with, you get this idea that the humans and the apes are now kind of working together. The mutants are defeated. They've scuttled back off into their holes, and maybe, just maybe, the humans and the apes can prevent the terrible future that we saw in the earlier films. So because you didn't get to see this, I tracked down the book because I wanted to, get more information about it. The cover is actually from the images from the previous film, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, but
Right.
it's Battle for Planet of the Apes. So I get the book, and I'm thinking there's going to be like an optimistic ending.
That's not the ape style.
That's not the ape style.
Since when? Ever the optimist.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Chapter
You
one.
would have had a bookmark.
I had a bookmark, and I think I must have put it in the wrong damn page. But anyway,
A human probably moved it.
yeah.
Ah, damn dirty humans.
So this is Mendez and Alma, the two mutants. This is after they've been resoundingly defeated, and they've gone back into their sort of underground domain of the mutants. And so we have, excuse my dry throat. Alma, Mendez stopped her. He held her by the shoulders and looked directly into her eyes. You are not mad. Do you understand me? You are not mad. Not mad, she repeated. Mendez realized then that they were not alone. A small crowd of curious men and women had entered the silo. It's a missile silo, right?
Yep.
Ooh.
He turned to them. Listen to me. We have been reborn today. This missile, this device, is a symbol of our rebirth. We must venerate it as a responsibility that our ancestors entrusted us with. We were given that responsibility because we are human. Because we are human, we are beautiful and we are good. We are beautiful, the crowd echoed. We are good. His face was scarred, his skin ravaged by radiation, but his eyes glowed with a holy mission. Mendez raised his hands and proclaimed, we are men, we are human. And again, the crowd echoed him. And Alma was silent. Her gaze kept straying back to the bomb, but whatever she was thinking about remained unspoken. And then just before the last page, bear with me.
He's left us in suspense.
I was going to say, edit this piece out. Okay. So we're now with the apes again. Waiting, muttered Mandemus. If a weapon is made, it will be used, Caesar, he said. I do not think we have won the war, the weapons have. And with that, he turned and disappeared back among the cases and crates of death, waiting, like a distant bomb, with Alpha Omega painted on its sides, waiting like the woman, no longer mad, sitting, staring, her hand on a console, on a button, waiting. So there, at the end of the optimistic fifth movie, we're laying the groundwork for the destruction of the Earth that we saw at the end of the second movie.
Yeah.
So we didn't get the happy ever after all.
No. So I always thought, and so after I saw 5 of these, you can watch them in any order you want because it's a loop.
Yeah.
Right? You can start at any place. You can start at 4, 3, 2, whatever, and just watch it, and then it just loops. And so I love that. I think that ending in the book should have been in the movie. Like, just put that in the end. That would have saved this for me. Not that this was bad. I like this movie a lot, but that would have been I would have loved that.
Yeah, I really thought we were going to get the they rode off into the sunset, and I read that and thought, oh my god.
Yeah. But Xazyl, you mentioned earlier that there's movie marathons on. There'd be a Star Wars one or a Planet of the Apes one or whatnot. After this 5th movie came out, they would in theaters show all 5 back to back.
That's cool.
In 1975, a campaign came out called Go Ape, and where they encouraged people to watch all these movies in the theater. And so it was almost this resurgence of ape mania going on. And so with that, they were like, okay, and the 5th movie was profitable, not super profitable, but profitable. But they said, we're not going to do any more big screen movies. So they moved to a television series called Planet of the Apes. And so the idea is this takes place after battle, but before the humans have gone mute. And so there's a character named Zayas, but he's not Dr. Zayas. He's just Zayas. And so it's kind of this like, and also the movies took place over by New York, and this story takes place in San Francisco. It's like a totally different coast. So it's a bunch of different rules and whatnot. But the humans can talk here, and Roddy McDowell's in it as Galen, a chimpanzee scientist. And so there's 13 episodes of this show, and it was just 2 humans that were spacemen that landed in a time-traveling spaceship, the same spaceship from that first movie. They used that prop a lot, and they just went on these adventures where they go to town to town. A lot of this was based on they call them prefects, but it's kind of like the ape that's running a little town. And so the 2 humans would go to this little town, and they would solve the problem of the week. And then General Urko, who was the gorilla that would chase them. And Spacey, which Vulcan played General Urko?
That was Mark Leonard.
Mark Leonard, Sarek.
He's not only the first Romulan in Star Trek. Not only was he Spock's dad, Ambassador Sarek, he was also the first commander Klingon with the lumpy forehead design.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We got a deep, rich science fiction background, that guy. So he played General Urko. Now, he was supposed to be General Ursus from beneath the Planet of the Apes, but he couldn't, in the makeup, say his name. They shortened it to General Urko, and then became a different character because he could say Urko. But this show is a lot of fun. I've recently just rewatched the whole thing, and it's 70s TV, but it's done the budget for this was $250,000 an episode in 1974. That was huge. It was a huge thing, and it was the highest rated science fiction television show on at the time. It was doing well, and they just made 13 episodes and pulled the plug on it. So,
does it have a conclusion?
Not here. We'll get to the conclusion. But no, this movie just ends with not even a cliffhanger. Just the last episode comes and goes, and they're on a raft because they saved a hand gliding bomb mission that they were on. Yeah. And so, but yeah, it's Alan and Pete, and there's some cool guest stars in this.
On the previous one, sorry, before we skip this one, on the previous one, did you notice the wordplay they used for the cinema, saying "Great Ape Movies"?
Yeah,
the Great Ape Movie. I just thought that was clever. And moving on.
It really was. But guest stars that you see in this show are Sandra Locke, so Clint Eastwood's better part of all the 70s. A very strapping young Beastmaster was in this one episode, Mark Singer. And there's a couple other ones, but there was some neat, the classic 70s guest stars. And also, yep. And also a lot of apes played other apes. They would play a gorilla in one episode and then an orangutan in the next one. So there was a smattering of cast members that were in a lot of these episodes. So it was kind of like if you were hired on, you were in, and they would kind of do something. But there was some I call it dud episodes, but there were some really kind of good episodes. And the last episode I think is my favorite. There's this female ape who really goes, and there's a twist ending. It's really quite good. I don't want to. This show isn't as well known as the movie, so go ahead and if you can watch it. It's great. I think it's fantastic.
So did you first encounter this as the TV series, or did
I
you
agree.
encounter this as a series of movies?
So what happened was this ran from 1974 for 13 episodes, and then it stopped. And then what happened was they put out an animated series the next year. Fox was like, yeah, we can do more. So they put out an animated series, which I think is the trippiest of all of the apes renderings, because it's more humans there, but it's Dr. Zaius, Cornelius, and Zira, and Nova is there. And Nova has dog tags from Brent.
Huh.
Right? They're like they see our dog tags from Brent. But also the apes are driving Jeeps and helicopters and all kinds of stuff. Like it's a real out there thing. But I love the style of this animation. So it's like 1975 animation. A lot of like static shots that are zoomed in on, and like just like they'll have like very minimal animation, but it looked great. The art looks incredible.
Yeah.
I think they wanted to take more elements from the original book.
Yeah.
By Pierre Boulle, and things that they weren't able to reproduce in the films with animation, they could quite easily, and so that's how come you end up with apes driving around in army surplus jeeps that have been left over from the human civilization, and they've figured out how to get little biplanes working, little aeroplanes, and so on. There's a lot more like infrastructure. The cities are more recognizable as a city rather than the kind of ape society that we saw in the earlier films. In this, they look like proper cities.
Yeah, and in this, the orangutans are very aware that humans used to rule the earth. They're very aware of it, and it's like very much kept a secret. Like it's not. I think it's like episode 2. They're like, if people knew the truth, and so it goes places like that. But this is a fun watch, and it's all on YouTube in super high definition.
Okay.
You can watch them all right here for free, and like not here on this channel, on their own channel. But they're great, and so it's real fun. If you like apes, you'll like that. But then in 1982, they recut the live action TV show into 5 movies, and so it was Back to the Planet of the Apes. It was Forgotten City of the Planet of the Apes. It was after that one. What was the next one? It was
Treachery and Greed.
Yeah, Treachery and Greed on the Planet of the Apes. Life, Liberty, and Pursuit on the Planet of the Apes, and Farewell to the Planet of the Apes. And so each of these movies was 2 episodes cut together to be an hour and a half movie. And so they're recut to kind of like flow as a movie, and they kind of tell the same stories. However, the cool thing about that was when they were first aired, they shot new bumpers for them, 30 seconds at the beginning and 30 seconds at the end, of a returning Roddy McDowall as Galen again, but they gave him bigger hair and put some gray in it. And he's sitting in like a modern office, and he's almost like, gather round, children, come, I'll tell you a tale. And then each movie is him telling a tale. And this is I think maybe one of my favorite twists in all of ape lore is that in the show he started as like a scientist, but then befriended these humans and was like converted. He became a good guy. And so for the whole show, he's a hero. And then for the first 4 movies, he's like, come children, and I'll see you tomorrow for another tale of Planet of the Apes. And he's being very, very kind. And the beginning of the last movie, he's like, hey, welcome back. And we're talking to our next story. And the bumper at the end of that movie was like, and eventually Pete and Alan found their computer disk and went home. Just as quickly as they came here. I could have gone with them, but would you want to come to my world? And he gets real like serious.
No.
He goes, would you want to come to my world? No, I don't think so. But you'll be here eventually. It's inevitable. And then it pans down, and like the monkey with the cymbals toy, it's a human version of that.
That's mind-blowing. That's so good.
All the bumpers leading up to that one, you can see him fiddling with something. He's tinkering with something. What's he doing? You just think it's like a little bit of business that the actor is doing. But no, if you watch carefully, he's putting that toy together. He's building it. And then the very last, as Adam says, it gets real dark because he's like, would you want to come to my world? You will. It's inevitable. It's like, oh,
yeah. It's this big villain twist.
Is that bottom image him flipping off a small child?
Yeah.
Yes. That's exactly
Good.
what happened.
Good.
Actually, he's flipping off the short orangutan from the previous film.
Exactly. Get out of here. Loving the humor.
My relationship with these films was slightly different. I'd seen the 5 films, and I thought that I was well versed in them, and I thought I was kind of perhaps a little bit of an aficionado in those films. And then one day in the newspaper, do you remember back in the old days when you used to look at the TV guide in the newspaper?
Yep.
Before digital TV came along, and this was back when we still only had 4 channels in the UK. So I was flipping through the newspaper, and I saw, afternoon film, Back to the Planet of the Apes. I was like, what the heck is this? And it was like, it's at the runtime, 90 minutes. It's a full film. And it was like, stars that had the named actors and everything. So I put a cassette in the old videotape machine. I recorded it. And yeah, it was like a complete film. I found it afterwards that it was actually episodes that had been edited together.
Yeah.
And then the next day there was another one, and it was Farewell to the Planet of the Apes. So you had the first one, and the last one. So sadly they missed out the ones in the middle, and we didn't have the bumpers with the aged Galen. It was just the films themselves. But to me, this was like 2 new films.
Yeah,
and it was great because of the first one. Again, you have another introduction where these astronauts are trying to find out what happened to the previous astronauts, and they crash land on this planet. They don't know that it's Earth, and you kind of go through that process again. But each time that you have the process of the apes discovering that this really is Earth, they managed to make it different for each group of new characters coming through.
Yeah.
The only thing about that I wasn't too keen on was that in the very first film with Charlton Heston, that the rocket ship crashing into the sea, it's all shot from like the inside of the ship, looking out of the canopy, and then suddenly you have this really excellent kind of raking shot, aerial shot around the nose cone of the ship, and the camera pulls back, and it's really it makes you kind of dizzy for a second, and really iconic view of the ship, but you only see the nose cone because the rest of the idea is the rest of the ship is underwater.
Yeah.
Then with the second film, when Brent crashes on land, again you see the nose cone, and then they put all this wreckage behind it to suggest that was the rocket behind it, and it was smashed to bits and destroyed. But then with this film, it was like they only had the nose cone, and it was kind of like they kind of forgot about the rest of the ship.
Yeah.
So it's almost like these 3 astronauts, because there was a third guy who sadly didn't make it. These 3 astronauts are going through space and through time in this tiny nose cone. Come on, guys, you forgot to put the rest of the ship in.
Yeah.
But, they land on this planet, and they meet Galen, and Galen starts to learn the truth about humans, and then they get pursued by Urko, and the first movie is that first episode, and then it cuts to an episode called The Trap, which is where there's the ground gives way. They're in San Francisco, of course, the San Andreas fault line. The ground gives way, and Burke and Urko are trapped under the earth. And you kind of feel like, oh, here we go. It's that same old story. The 2 guys who hate each other are trapped, and they've got to work together to get out of it.
Yeah, enemy mine all over again.
But exactly. But the way it's dealt with is so clever, because you think, Urko's beginning to understand, okay, these humans aren't so bad. And then he discovers an image from the past of an ape in a cage, a zoo. And it just drives him insane. So as he comes out, and he's been injured, they managed to rescue these guys. Verdon has done a deal with one of the other gorillas, and I think it was played by Norm Alden from the Transformers, this other gorilla. And it goes to show you, it's not just a case of, oh, they're gorillas, therefore they're evil. This other character, he's only a bit part character, but he's really well fleshed out, because this guy can think for himself. And Verdon does a deal with this guy that they'll work together to get Urko and Burke out of this hole in the ground. And as Urko's coming up, he's been injured, and everyone thinks, oh, we're all copacetic now, right? We're all friends now, right? But because Urko has just seen this image of the past, and his blood's boiling. He's like he can barely speak. He's like, kill them, kill them. You know? And this other gorilla, he says to his troop, take Urko, you know, rescue him, get him out of here, get him medical treatment. And as they leave, he fires his gun so that the gorillas think that he has carried out his orders and killed the humans and Galen. But he hasn't, because for him, a deal is a deal. He made a promise and he lets them go. And I think that's a really great character moment there.
I also love the way they did the image of the ape in the cage. So what happens is, like, when they're in this, trying to get out of this hole that they're in, Urko doesn't want to help because apes don't do work, only humans do work. So eventually, and the whole time, the human's like, hey, like, you know, we used to rule up this is, and he's like telling him what this stuff is, like, this is the subway line, and because we used to be humans. And so he's telling Urko, like, yeah, we used to like run the planet, like it's a role reversal. And Urko gets so angry that he says, no, I was lying to you. You're right. I was lying. Apes have always been in control. The humans didn't roll. And so then they start working together. And after that, Urko finds the paper, and he's like, oh, and it's like he's angry because he was lied to, but he's also angry that he was being told the truth that he didn't want to hear. So he's like double. It was played perfectly.
Yeah. Mark Leonard at his best.
Yeah, no, it's great. So these movies came out again. And but after these movies aired, that was it. That was kind of the end of the franchise. It was 5 movies, two TV shows, and then these 5 recut movies. But again, there was merchandising, and I brought up here all these Mego action figures that came out. 68 was when the first movie came out. These came out in 74. So like 8 years later, they brought out toys for them. So series 1 down here was a generic astronaut because they couldn't get Charlton Heston's likeness rights. And then Cornelius and Zira, Dr. Zaius, and a generic ape soldier. Now, do you guys have much experience with Mego figures? Are you like aware of them? Were they over there?
I'm aware of them. I never had any.
The only the only kind of awareness we had of the Mego figures was where I grew up. We had these US Air Force bases nearby, and so some of the school kids would have like Mego figures, but we didn't really have them in our toy shops, and weren't really aware of them.
They had unique charm to them, as you guys are aware. It's like one of my favorite things is the gloves that used to come with the superheroes.
It's like an oven mitt.
Yeah, so like here's Batman's glove, where he's like, I'm going to fight crime and take the cookies out of the oven. But it's okay because it's kind of got charm. But like these ape figures, because the movie costumes were so otherworldly, that these toys almost looked like a perfect representation of that. Like they looked so close because these were like a loss at a time too. Like I saw these at yard sales and I was like, what are these toys from a different time? Like they're so different than the toys that we were playing with. But if you look at the Gorilla Soldier, they gave him gloves, which are just like socks on his hands. Like they're just like tube socks on his hands. And then in series 2, you get this black-faced gorilla who's General Ursus from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And then the guy in the purple is Urko from the TV show. And then Galen is exactly the same figure as Caesar. It's identical. The only way you can tell them apart is that Caesar was released in a Type 1 body, so he's got metal rivets. And Galen is released in a Type 2 body, so he's got plastic rivets. And so that's how you can tell the two apart. But other than that, they're identical.
Also, Caesar is in that ready for action pose.
Yes. So, and actually, when I found my Galen at Joe Fest, he was marked as Cornelius. And I looked at his wrist and I was like, "Oh, this is actually Galen's. This is the one that I want to get." And then you got these two humans, Pete and Alan. But again, these were great toys, and the fact that they came out 8 years after the movie and sold huge. So Marty Abrams has a solid 24 karat gold Cornelius head from the mold.
That's cool.
And he had that made up when they sold 1 million Cornelius figures.
Wow, that's cool.
That's amazing. Like you say, 8 years later, and they can still sell 1 million of one of these particular figures.
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, I think because it was just before our generation, we weren't aware of exactly how big Ape Mania was. And I'm like, I wish we could have seen it. I wish we could have seen it.
I sometimes I'll go back and like buy science fiction magazines from either when I was really little or from, like you say, just before our generation came along. And I'd see all these articles about Planet of the Apes, and I had a kind of a sense of how huge it was. And some of those old articles are really, fun to read. You have an interview with Mark Leonard, and of course, we're used to seeing him in Star Trek. But then there'll be an entire article just him talking about his experience working on Planet of the Apes. So if you ever track down any of those things, they're good fun. I was just thinking, in fact, that when you're showing the Verdon and Burke figures there, that the Farewell to the Planet of the Apes, as far as I knew, that was the end of it. This was like, I didn't know there were 3 other films in between those two, but as this was Farewell to the Planet of the Apes, this was the end of the story, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So at the end of the film, as you said earlier, they've had this hang glider mission where this this chimpanzee who started out as seemingly quite a nice character, and I don't want to blow the ending, but there's a kind of a heel turn there.
Yeah.
And it ends up with our guys ditching at sea. And of course, because the apes aren't great swimmers, they just assume that they're all dead. But our human friends have cleverly got a raft hidden around the bay. And so they're able to get Galen, who can't swim, aboard the raft. And then they climb aboard and paddle out to sea. And it's kind of like that farewell going off into the sunset kind of image of them paddling away. And so I always felt that was kind of a positive ending, because I thought, well, this is the end of the story. So those guys are obviously going to go away and find somewhere safe to live, somewhere where they're not going to be hunted and persecuted. And maybe with Galen's help, they can create this society. So I had quite a positive, upbeat kind of relationship with this film, because this nice ending.
Yeah.
They managed to escape, and they're going to live happily ever after, someplace safe. But then, like you say, when I then discovered that they, in America, had been shown with these bumpers at the start and the end, and although Galen does say, they did manage to go back to their world, but then he has that downer right at the end there, where you're going to come to my world whether you like it or not, sort of thing. That kind of, again, like the 5th film, it was like it could have been such a nice, sweet ending. No,
that's not the ape way.
That's not how the apes do it.
Now, I do want to say, though, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right? And so these Mego ape figures, they sold huge. But while kids in North America in the 60s and 70s were playing with G.I. Joe, what were the kids playing with in the UK instead of G.I. Joe, Spacey? What were you guys playing with over there?
Action Man. Right.
So if you played your cards right and went to the right bootleg store, you could get Action Ape Man. So the story behind these is AHI, the toy company, had the license for Planet of the Apes toys and were going to make figures. And at the last minute, Mego swooped in and took the license, outbid them. Wow. So they already had these tooled up. So this, we'll release them anyway. So we'll just call them Action Ape Man. So these were going to be the official Planet of the Apes figures that we were going to get.
Wow.
Wow.
Their eyes are really far apart.
Yeah, they're all cross-eyed. I think they're kind of half apes. Like
I like the jacket with the buttons down one side. That's quite stylish.
That is cool.
I want to get these all. Like, this is my new thing. I got all the apes figures, now I want to get all these guys. I need to expand and get the Action Ape Man. It's amazing. Everything about it's so great. But
yeah, that is the best of the bunch, that one.
Yeah. So that's the original 70s, 60s, 70s run of Planet of the Apes. And I don't know if we'll ever get, maybe the Marvel Cinematic Universe is kind of like mimicked that hype again, especially around Endgame time, but
until Endgame.
Yeah, until Endgame time.
Phil's here. Threw it all away.
Yeah, and then they threw it all away. But but even that is a pre-existing story being retold. Whereas these ape movies, it was like, we're just going for it. We're just going to go out and we're going to just create something that's going to be otherworldly. And
what was the, other than Star Wars, I can't think of another franchise that was created out of just one single creative mind, and then later spawned those sort of blockbuster sequels. I mean, you got horror franchises, but I don't think that counts. I don't think Superman movies, as good as they don't count because they came from a different source material.
Yep.
I'm sure that there are other things. I'm just for the love of it, I cannot think of anything other than Planet of the Apes that has that broadness, that longevity that spawned out of one movie and then became an ultimate hit.
Yeah.
Like I can't think of anything other than Star Wars, but
yeah. No, and again, they tried to reboot it in the early 2000s, and that did not work. And then they tried again with the new trilogy, and I think the new trilogy does its best when it leans into the old movies, when it references the old movies and ties in. I think that's where
CG though. It's looking like CG apes. As good as the CG is, and Andy Serkis, that's the guy, right?
Yeah.
Tremendous acting chops. However, not the same. Not the same as the ape suits. Yeah, certified not ruined, Spacey.
Ruined yet. No, 100%. And again, it's one of those things that the ape makeup was so good, but also wasn't trying to look like a realistic ape, tried to look like its own thing. And I think that was the strength of it. And so even when you're watching it for the first time, you're like, yeah, okay, I see that they're apes, but they're kind of like an alien kind of ape. Like, this isn't Earth. This is some alien ape thing. And then when it's revealed to be Earth, you're like, oh, I guess that's it. Just kind of ties into the story. It's almost like a perfect alignment of happenstance. Gives us like a near perfect franchise.
Yeah. And with the Tim Burton film, I think there was a lot of stuff in it that was good.
Yep.
But I remember at the time thinking, I was kind of like, this film doesn't tie in with the originals. What's going on there? It's a separate thing. And it's kind of like when they redid Battlestar Galactica, that was totally separate as well. They only all they did was basically reuse some of the character names. The story was totally different and far more violent and sexual as well. Kind of dark and unpleasant by comparison.
Sex and violence.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the Muppet Show.
But now, true. But now I'm kind of glad that they are keeping things separate, because you look at how, I'm going to go on a Disney rant again, aren't I? You look at how
this is a safe space.
These new productions, they are purposefully, to spite the people who love it and have kept it alive for all these years. They are purposefully going back through the previous stories and just destroying them, pulling them apart and making them horrible failures, and really sadistic behavior with these things. So to say, well, I want to keep these Planet of the Apes stories separate from those Planet of the Apes stories, it's entirely doable because they are separate already.
Yeah. And you could even say that the movies and the two TV series are separate, or you could say they're in the same world.
It's funny you mentioned that. I try not to get into arguments online, but I am a guy who will fight his corner when necessary. So I was talking I was typing about the Planet of the Apes TV series and the TV movies, and I said, if you want, you could consider these films to be the 5 new films after the original 5. You could think of it as being a 10-movie serial. And some guy immediately just jumps on me and goes, "No, they're separate. You're wrong." And I said, well, I said, yes, in terms of when these films were produced, the guys making the TV show probably weren't necessarily thinking about connecting these with the films as such, because of back in those days, they weren't necessarily thinking in terms of creating a multiverse like they do nowadays, you know. So I said, yeah, you're probably right. They probably weren't thinking of them in terms of being part of the film series. But if you're a fan of them and you want them to be part of the film series, then it's quite feasible. You can quite easily squeeze these films into the same cycle. No,
Like
you're
the
wrong.
holiday special for Star Wars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and exactly. And this guy got really militant about it. It was like, it's a different continuity. Stuff happens in the series which clashes with the you know, with the movies, and you know, they're entirely separate. You're wrong. And I said, if you listen, I'm actually agreeing with you when I say that they are probably not meant to be together. All I'm saying is that if somebody enjoys them enough and wants them to be part of those films, they can watch them in order. I have watched them in order and thoroughly enjoyed them as one long series. And this guy would not get off it. And in the end, I you know, it was like he was telling me that my opinion was wrong. You can't have a wrong opinion. Everybody gets an opinion. So in the end, I just shut him down. I thought, I've had enough of this guy. And I said, how do you intend to enforce your opinion over mine? How are you going to do this? And with that, once you realize you couldn't actually touch me at all.
No, Phil, it wasn't me.
But yeah, you know, like you say, these two quite easily fit together. You could, you know, you could put them, if you want to, you can put them all together. You don't have to if you don't want to.
But you could also argue that there was some shift in the timeline. You could say though, because of the time travel, you could say that it does, and because some things were realized through time travel that changed it slightly. Even if it does then circle back as a loop, you can, like Back to the Future proves that you can make some changes and still loop back.
Yeah.
So I interpret it. Here we go. There's Adam's hot take on the Planet of the Apes timeline. So buckle up.
I've been waiting for this.
I interpret it in that there was we'll call it prime timeline of Taylor, where you jumped ahead to the future that was the Planet of the Apes. But Cornelius and Zira heading back in part 3 sped up that process. So apes took over much earlier than they normally would have, speeding up the Planet of the Apes. And that was why by the time you get to the TV series, humans are talking because that virus hasn't got to them yet. And even in the first episode of the first scene, there's a dog in the first episode of the TV show.
Yes.
And in that timeline, all the dogs have died. So people stick on that, but I'm like, but maybe they came back. Maybe there was like a strain of dogs that were immune to the virus. Like there's you can't pigeonhole things because of one thing. But these movies, you know, anything that has that ape makeup, that ape style makeup, and Roddy McDowell in it, I'm like, that's the Dowell universe. Like that's
it's in. Yeah.
That's in, right? Yeah. And you can get away with it. A lot of Apes fans online, that's a cool thing to say, are now saying that like in the new movies, like maybe they'll do like a multiverse thing. I was like, don't even touch my Apes with the multiverse. Like don't. You go and make all the Apes movies you want, and I'll go and I'll watch them and I'll love them because I love this lore. But don't like have the CGI apes meet the makeup apes and just try to do this like a weird, like stop it. You have your Deadpool movie, let that be its thing, but don't ruin my apes by making it a multiverse. Like, come on, we don't need to be this like control freaks that everything needs to make sense. We need a multiverse movie to tie these ends together, right? We don't need that.
Right. No, we don't need it ruined.
We don't need it ruined.
You said the thing.
You did it. We can stop the stream now. I win the But guys, I love nothing more than chatting with my friends about things that I love, whether people else love them or not. When I was in high school and I meet somebody new, even girls, I would show them Planet of the Apes first to judge if I wanted to be their friends.
Like, did you hide it in a different box, a different video box?
So the thumbnail for this screen here, the stream around the blue, that was the box that I had mine in, so it didn't reveal the spoiler.
Very smart.
Yeah. So I would be like, hey, let's watch Planet of the Apes, and I'm like, if you dig this, now if they didn't like it, I wasn't like, you're not my friend. But if you dig this, I'm like, then we can we're going to be on the same page because This is all time absolute. I love all this stuff. This is my absolute favorite franchise. I think it's perfection.
That is interesting. I wouldn't have thought, as knowing you, it doesn't surprise me. But when first meeting you, I don't think that I could pinpoint Planet of the Apes being your favorite franchise. It's legitimately surprising, but not a surprise at the same time. Like, it makes sense. Makes sense. It's like a twist.
The reason I put off buying the toys for so long was because I said I don't want just one of them. If I'm going to do apes, I want them all. And so then last year when I was at Joe Fest, I was like, you know what? I think we could actually get in one day. I can find them all. And so that's what I did this year. And I was like, not the humans. I gotta go find those original humans still, but all the apes, and we'll get there.
It's like the books. I've got some of the books based on the movies.
Yeah.
But the books based on the TV series that the TV movies were based on. There's 4 of these. It kills me that I haven't been able to get the 4th one yet. I have seen it online, and it goes for crazy money. The other ones you can pick up fairly inexpensively. The 4th one goes for a bucket of money. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was like a smaller print run, but it's that instinct in us to, maybe it's leftover caveman programming to go out hunting for things.
Yeah,
you got to get all the apes figures, and I got to get that damn book.
Exactly. we gotta figure it out. But no. But guys, I have loved chatting apes with you guys. I appreciate the time zones of the Planet of the Apes fans. That you guys were up early, and I'm middle of my day here, but that's all good. We like to have some fun. So we are gonna sign off. Spacey's gonna go to bed, and Xazyl's gonna go to work, and I'm gonna go home. So that's.
We should call this time zones of the Planet of the Apes.
Time zones of the Planet of the Apes. Absolutely. If you guys.
If you travel back on the time zone of the Planet of the Apes, you might find that you're in an alternate timeline where Thade was a Abraham Lincoln type figure, the great big Abraham Lincoln statue.
I will say this about the Wahlberg movie. I will say this: if the humans didn't talk, and if the ending was different, like that twist ending wasn't stupid, it would have been a 50% better movie.
And if it didn't try to have sex with the ape.
Well, there is that. Yeah, I think they were trying to think of what shocking image can we end on, because of the original one had ended on such a shocking image. I think they were just trying to come up with something bizarre.
Right.
I think the way I sort of felt about it sometime afterwards was I thought, well, as they were going through time, he must have leapt into an alternate timeline. That must be what happened. He ended up on this planet where Thade had been around in the times of like the equivalent of Lincoln's time, Right. But at the time when I first saw it, I was just like, nah, they're just trying to top the Statue of Liberty ending. That's all that is.
Yeah. I love this comment. If humans didn't talk, we'd fix a bunch of movies.
Oops, my comment is loading, but I was basically saying to tag in on Phil's comment that would actually be for real life as well. Oops, I wrote Row life. Row. All right. Well, unfortunately, I gotta go to work.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being here, and maybe we'll talk more apes at some point in time. But this has been the best day. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you all soon.